What is going on, everybody? In today's video, we are going to be hopping right into a 12-team full PPR mock draft for the 2024 fantasy football season. We'll be rolling with one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, tight end spot, two flex spots, and five bench spots for the purpose of today's video. I'll be drafting from the 1.5, going over a strategy that I think can definitely help you guys come out with a great draft from the 1.5. I'll be going round by round here, telling you guys what players I am looking at in each and every round and how we're going to put together that strategy to come together with a great roster by the end of this mock draft. And I'll be drafting with my community here, real actual subscribers, no computer, no half computer, CPU picks, auto picks, all that stuff. These are real actual drafters mocking with me so you guys can get a good, realistic look at what a 2024 fantasy football draft might look like from the 1.5 this season. If you guys are new to the channel, this is all we do here all year long. Free fantasy football content, redraft, dynasty, and best ball. If you guys are into that, be sure to join the community by hitting that subscribe button down below. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, drop them down below in the comments section as well, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Let's not waste any more time. Let's hop right into today's mock draft. So drafting from the 1.5 this year, I think is actually a pretty decent draft spot. For me, I think there's a really simple strategy that you can implement here, drafting from the 1.5, and I really feel the same way about the 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 in terms of strategy. And you really just have to determine if you're going to take a wide receiver or running back with these selections, right? Some people are going Brees Hall or Bijan Robinson as early as the 1-4 or 1-5. And I don't think that's necessarily crazy if you want to start your draft with a running back and it's one of those two guys, assuming Christian McCaffrey is already off the board. But for me, I think for the most part, full PPR, double flex formats, I'm going wide receiver with this first selection. Once again, I think it's okay, perfectly fine if you want to go running back. But what we're going to do here is just go with the best available wide receiver. If it's Justin Jefferson to you or Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, if he's available, that's fine. But let's go ahead and just start with Jamar Chase for the purpose of today's video. Then what we're going to do at the 2.8 is we're then going to go with the best available running back. And then at the 3.5, go back to the wide receiver position. And we're just going to alternate the position throughout this draft. Let a good value tight end fall to us, and then go late round quarterback. And, you know, I talk about this, basically do the same exact strategy from the 1.4, which, by the way, if you guys need to see a mock draft from the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, or the 1.4, I'll have all of those linked down below. Same style format of this video where you guys can see me go round by round and talk about going through a strategy from all of those positions. And we have tons of live streams that I've been doing all off season long. You guys can go through, find mock drafts from different draft positions, all with real subscriber bases, as well as real fantasy football drafts that I've been doing on Underdog from all kinds of different draft positions as well. So got everything that you guys need on the channel, but I'll link those other mock drafts down below. So yeah, I really feel like this strategy that I call a bounce back strategy, where we're just alternating between the two positions. This is a strategy that I did in a lot of leagues last year. In two of the leagues that I won championships in, this is the strategy that I did, because what happens with this particular strategy is you just come out with a good roster head to toe. Like maybe you don't have anything over the top at any position, but you're prepared at every position to go into the redraft season. And I think that's like something that kind of gets lost in fantasy football. Is like, you know, of course the draft is important, but the draft really is preparing you for the entirety of the football season, and the fact that you're going to have to play the waiver wire and take advantage of, buying and selling opportunities in terms of trades throughout the season as well. You're going to have to deal with injuries, all kinds of things. You're going to have to deal with disappointment in players that you drafted that you liked, hopefully not, but it happens, right? And you're trying to form the best potential roster for the upcoming season to prepare you for the entirety of the season. I think this strategy doesn't leave you weak at any positions. It leaves you with good depth all around. And every time I do this strategy, I just finish with a roster that I'm happy with, that I feel good about going into the coming season. So here at the 2.8, if you want to go Devon Achane, I think that's fine. If you want to go Derrick Henry, I think that's fine. If you like Josh Jacobs here, I think that's okay. And no, I don't mind going Isaiah Pacheco here. I think Isaiah Pacheco has top 5 fantasy running back potential for the season. So heavy running back second round. I'm seeing this happen more often lately than in comparison to earlier in the season, where the second round is a bit heavier at running back than it is at wide receiver. And beginning of the offseason, it was mostly heavy at wide receiver, and you were seeing, if Gibbs didn't get selected in the first, Gibbs, JT, Kyron Barkley at the end, A Chain at the end, and now things have really started to gravitate towards Barkley going towards the beginning of the second, Kyron going at the beginning of the second, and ETN, Henry, A Chain, and sometimes Jacobs and or Pacheco also in the second round. There goes Jacobs as well. So far, we're at 3, now 4 wide receivers in the second round. So what we want to do here, looking ahead to the 3.5. Now, I will say if you want to kind of deviate at any point with this strategy and alternate here, like go running back in the third, go wide receiver in the fourth, if you feel like there's better value, then I think that's okay as well. Like if Isaiah Pacheco made it to the 3.5, which he does not, I'm okay with going Pacheco there than going back to wide receiver in the fourth. But I do love Rashad White this year. I love James Cook as well, but I think we go ahead and we go wide receiver here. Got an interesting kind of tier here. Brandon Ayuk, Stephon Diggs, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, Jalen Waddle, even Michael Pittman. I think there's an argument for any of these players right here. The Ayuk situation at the time I'm recording this is a giant mess. But let's go ahead and go Deebo Samuel. I like Deebo at the 3-5, middle of the third round. I think that's perfectly fine. If Brandon Ayuk does get traded, goes to the Browns, Patriots, Jets, Steelers, Commanders, whatever it's going to be, then Deebo, I think, will move up in overall ADP. So right now, being able to get Deebo in the third round, I think is a pretty good steal. But also, I think Deebo's fine, even if Ayuk is still on this team in the middle of the third round as our second wide receiver behind Jamar Chase, still tied to one of the best offenses in the league, one of the highest scoring offenses in the league. I personally love Brock Purdy as a quarterback, was huge on Brock Purdy going into last year. I think he'll be fine. I'm not anyway, Brock Purdy doubter over here. C-Mac, George Kittle. I don't know why I'm trying to explain why the Niners offense is going to be good this year, but they'll be fine. Deebo Samuel, a great selection here. So we'll go back to running back at the 4-8. And in terms of players that I'd like to see, I mean, Rashad White or James Cook are there. We're smashing the draft button. There goes Rashad White. They're not going to make it back. I know this group of drafters pretty well. So I think we're starting to look at potential guys like maybe Kamara or Joe Mixon fall that far. I'm not going to bank on it, but Mixon I have seen fall back here and there in mocks recently because of the injuries popping up in training camp. But in the fourth round, I'll take a chance on him. Maybe you don't want to pair him with a guy like Devon Achane. He's also a little bit injury prone, of course, but I think Mixon or Kamara fine there. I think Kenneth Walker fine. And honestly, if one of those running backs is not there, Cook, Mixon, Kamara, or Walker, and there goes Cook. I think this is the point in any draft really where I just think there's really good value in the fourth round at wide receiver. So especially with this particular strategy where we're trying to alternate back to running back, I think this is a good point where you can kind of look and say, I think I'm just going to go wide receiver and then go back to running back in the fifth, especially if, two things. If you start, your draft with a running RB1 that you really believe in, like for me, like a Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor, Bijan, Brees Hall, of course, Christian McCaffrey, even Isaiah Pacheco for me, Gibbs probably in that mix too, Kyron's probably. I mean, whoever you believe in, right? Then I think you can definitely alternate back to not going running back till the fifth because there's a lot of really solid running back options in later rounds. But also, if you go like double hero running back, or you just start with running back in the first round and you do this, particular strategy, go like Brees Hall, and then you maybe go Chris Olave in the second. Then you got an Isaiah Pacheco in the third, just throwing that out there, right? Then I think at that point, you should go wide receiver in the fourth and the fifth because you have such a stud at RB1, such a high potential at RB2. I think it's completely fine just to go ahead and get two wide receivers in the fourth and the fifth. So always remember to kind of play the board and, even if you're trying to follow a particular strategy, you don't always have to get 100% caught up in it, and it's important to deviate when important to do so, right? So, looking here, looks like, there goes Kamara. So I think Mixon or Walker is okay with this pick. Obviously, one of them is going to be there. I do really like DK Metcalf, who's still on the board. I think at the 4.8, he's a really good value. It's just like for me, this next tier running back, Jones, Connor, Monty, Swift, Stevenson, one of those guys might, you know, be there at the 5.5, and I don't think there's a huge difference. Although I prefer Mixon or Walker, I guess. So yeah, I think you can go wide receiver here if you want. And let's go ahead and do that. And let's see what happens. Let's go DK Metcalf. I just think he's a great value there. Having Metcalf in the flex, just really hard to pass up. There goes Walker. We'll see who's available at running back at the 5.5. I just don't think there's a huge difference in any of these guys. And I do really like Kenneth Walker. I think he's in a different tier than any of the players left, but I don't think by a massive margin. So, if Mixon or Kamara is there, I think we smash the draft button. I'm going to go Walker. I think it's fine. But Metcalf also just a tremendous value. This is a player that sometimes going at towards the beginning of the third round. So I think getting him there, absolutely beautiful. And then, this has been a heavy running back draft. So I think we still want to go running back with this next pick. But if you don't want to, I think that's okay as well because there's just a lot of good names at wide receiver available. If you want to go with a guy like Rashee Rice, Tank Dell here, T. Higgins, George Pickens, McLaurin, I'm not going to knock it, but I want to kind of stay as true to this strategy as possible before I get too excited and try to completely deviate away from it. Sorry, couldn't talk there. But yeah, for me, going RB2 here, I think I want to go for a little bit of upside. I think James Conner, Ramondre Stevenson, Najee Harris, all okay right here. But what is their ceiling, really? What type of like PPR upside do we really get out of that bunch? For me, in this, round, maybe a little bit later rounds as well, if your draft isn't as aggressive at running back, I think DeAndre Swift with the Bears is just a nice PPR upside type play. I think when you look at what he did last year with the Eagles before the tush push completely took over, DeAndre Swift was actually a huge steal last year in drafts. And I've been talking about Swift all off season long. I love him with the Bears. I think a rookie quarterback like Caleb Williams is going to be checking down to DeAndre Swift a lot. So that pass catching upside is there. But also the Bears should be in the red zone more this year. And if you're worried about Khalil Herbert and Roshan Johnson, I get it. There might be a little bit of a committee mix here, but I think Swift is the best running back on this team. He's going to be utilized to his potential and the type of player that he is, like we saw last year for a majority of the, at least first half of the season with DeAndre Swift on the Eagles. So I like Swift. I'm not really afraid to take him against ADP. If you like Connor, Stevenson, Najee Harris there more, I think that's okay. If we were going to go wide receiver, which kind of deviates a little bit too far from the strategy for me, there's still a ton of good names, which makes me feel better about waiting to go wide receiver at 6.8. We could also go running back at 6.8 and then see who's available at 7.5 for wide receiver. But I don't know who's going to be available here at the 6.8, but Higgins still on the board, McLaurin, Jaden Reed, and then both Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown are available. And for me, a lot of these teams I'm building at this point in the offseason, I'm trying to get one of those Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers on my team, especially if they're a wide receiver 4 behind caliber of players like Chase, Debo, and Metcalf. So I just think in the flex, the amount of upside that a Hollywood Brown or Xavier Worthy is going to bring to the table is something that you can't pass up. And what this passing offense for the Chiefs is going to be this year, as long as everyone stays healthy. Rashee Rice goes at the 5.7 tonight. I will gladly take Rashee Rice as a wide receiver 3 or 4 as well. I think he brings a little bit more consistency potentially. But if you guys have been following the channel this offseason, you don't need to hear me talk about the Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers and how I feel about them. But it's just too good of an upside play for me to potentially pass up on. So I'll probably go with one of them with this selection at the 6.8. But if you want to go McLaurin, Jaden Reed, Chris Godwin, there are some really good names at wide receiver still available. I really think right now on Sleeper, the 4th, 5th, and 6th rounds just have tremendous value at wide receiver. So there's also something to be said about going double hero running back following Sleeper's ADP. And there's even other wide receivers like Christian Watson has an ADP of 101.8. There's definitely some strategies in tailing hero or double hero running back or just going aggressive at running back early that I think make a ton of sense with the ADP you see on the Sleeper app. So yeah, I mean, just plenty of good options here at wide receiver. We did see a lot of quarterbacks and tight ends gone the last round or so, so that helped. But I'm not afraid to take Hollywood Brown against his ADP on Sleeper. I think McLaurin is great there. I think Jaden Reed is good there as well. I really like Chris Godwin once again. But yeah, I mean, Hollywood Brown, a player who's not going at this ADP like on Underdog, for example. So I'm just so used to drafting him a bit earlier. And, you know, these Kansas City Chiefs wide receivers don't really go at the ADP that Sleeper has them at least with the, people I've been mock drafting with over the past month or so. You see a lot of drafters not afraid to draft those players at their ADP. So for me, I think Hollywood, just a great selection there. We'll take him as our wide receiver 4. Our wide receivers, absolutely loaded here. We got a lot of upside at running back. Devon Achane and DeAndre Swift at running back. Then look at this wide receiver room: Jamar Chase, Debo, Metcalf, Hollywood Brown. We are in a great spot through the first 6 rounds of this draft. Do not forget that I am still running several streams throughout the week where I am hopping into real 2024 fantasy football drafts on Underdog Fantasy. If you guys don't want to wait any longer to draft 2024 fantasy football teams, you don't have to. Underdog has all kinds of different unique contests that you guys can enter, including their flagship Best Ball Mania, where somebody is going to win up to $1.5 million. This is the best way to prepare for the upcoming fantasy football season. These are the sharpest drafts throughout the offseason. Plus, Underdog already has week 1 NFL pick'ems out where you guys can play in their new streaks format and win up to 1000x your money. Promo code the catch, the link is down below as well. Get you a first time 50% deposit match up to $250 plus a mystery pick'em that you guys can use towards that streaks up to 1000x your money. Promo code the catch. Don't forget, when you sign up, we'll get you that first time 50% deposit match on Underdog Fantasy. All right, so looking ahead to the 7.5, probably best for us to go running back, even if there are some tempting players left. I think Chris Godwin's the most tempting for me. Xavier Worthy is available. I like Deontay Johnson a lot here as well. So maybe if you wanted to go with a different player at the 6'8", other than Hollywood Brown, and you still wanted a piece of that Chiefs offense, as long as Xavier Worthy doesn't go with the 7'4", there's something to be said here about not going Hollywood, going with a different position, a different player, than still going Xavier Worthy at the 7'5". But for me, I think we just go with, once again, the highest upside play at running back. And for me, it's going to be Jonathan Brooks. I'm starting to really warm up to drafting more Jonathan Brooks. I know he's going to miss time. I know even when he comes back, whether it's week 3 or week 4, he's still a rookie. It's going to take a little bit of time to get Jonathan Brooks going in the system. He's not going to get 15, 18, 20, 22 touches right off the bat. But this is a play for the second half of the season. And you are kind of spending a high draft capital on Jonathan Brooks, but I think on a team like this where we're really just going for upside at running back at this point, I think it's worth it here. And that is not to, take away from the fact that Chuba Hubbard has an ADP of 136.5 on Sleeper. And I've talked about Chuba Hubbard a ton throughout the offseason. Chuba Hubbard is a player who's going to be relevant, I think, for the Panthers for a majority of the season. He's going to get those touches to start the year. And you look at what Chuba Hubbard did last year when he was the lead back for this team. Good things. He was literally a league winner in fantasy football last year. 12 through 18, double digits every single game. A player you're able to pick up off the waiver wire, plug in, not worry about. The ceiling maybe not massively high, but through the fantasy playoffs, 12.3, 12.1, and 11.1 in full PPR scoring. So Chuba Hubbard, a guy who I think is going to be just fine in terms of where he's going in drafts, and I think is actually going to be relevant even when Jonathan Brooks initially comes back. But I think once Brooks has the opportunity to get going in an improved Panthers offense this year with Dave Canales as the head coach, he's still going to pay off at his ADP, and kind of a nice upside stash. He's probably going to start this season on IR or the PUP list. So depending on your league settings, you probably just throw him on the IR and fight for a guy on the waiver wire early for a bit as well. So let's start to talk about quarterbacks and tight ends, right? Which I haven't touched on this draft so far. Right now in single quarterback 12-team leagues, I'm just not worried about the quarterback position. You guys just have to remember you don't necessarily have to spend that high draft capital on one of these top tier elite quarterbacks to win a championship, right? You can get a top 12, top 10, top 8 player at the quarterback position at the end of your draft. And this is something that happens almost consistently on a regular basis. I think in 2022 was kind of like the most recent year where like the top or four scoring quarterbacks, maybe five, like the disparity between them and quarterbacks 6, 7, and 8 was pretty dang big. So going into last year, it was like a large emphasis on getting an elite quarterback, and then it just didn't pay off. And for the most part in fantasy football, you look at quarterbacks last year, right? Guys like Brock Purdy, Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, Tua, Jared Goff, all these guys had very solid fantasy seasons. Even guys like Matthew Stafford and Baker Mayfield. So um, I just don't worry in a single quarterback league about the quarterback position until later in drafts. But I will say at the tight end position, for me, I don't want to spend a high draft selection on tight end. And I think it's okay if you kind of deviate away from the position for most of your draft. But I kind of look at things and I want a player like in the Jake Ferguson, Evan Ingram range. And if you don't get one of them, I don't think that your draft is necessarily like ruined. I think there's a lot of good players like Goddard, Dalton Schultz, Cole Kmet, Pat Fryermuth. You can even pair with a player like TJ Hawkinson, who's going to start the year on IR. David Njoku, plenty of options, right? But I think for me, like the sweet spot is league winner potential. Top 5 potential is like Jake Ferguson, Evan Ingram for me. So especially Evan Ingram, who's been a top 5 fantasy tight end 2 years in a row and just gets all the way pushed back in rankings for some reason. But Jake Ferguson, the second most red zone targets out of any tight end last year. I think the Cowboys, Dak Prescott, are going to rely on him a lot this year. He was the tight end 9 last year in fantasy football. This Cowboys offense, kind of in a weird spot right now, don't get me wrong, but I think overall that's going to help Jake Ferguson this upcoming season. So I like where he's going in drafts, and I think he's a player who I just don't want to miss out on at his current ADP. And looking ahead to the 9.5, kind of in a spot here now in this strategy where we're sitting pretty good here, wide receiver, 4 good guys, but in a double flex format, full PPR format, you want to make sure you have depth at wide receiver. That's always one of the most important things to me. And when it comes to running back, there's still some late round names that we might be able to hit. And at least there's good handcuffs as this draft goes on for at least another round or two. Kind of see what happens here. So for me, though, sitting here at pick 9.5, there's a couple wide receivers here. Brian Thomas, Christian Watson, Jamison Williams, Romeo Dobbs. This tier wide receiver still being available right here is just way too good to pass on. So I'll go Christian Watson all day long right here as my wide receiver 5. Don't even really care about what's happening at running back. The amount of upside that Christian Watson will bring to this roster when healthy is way too good to pass up on for me. I like Jamison Williams as a sleeper. I think Brian Thomas at this point in the draft, definitely okay taking a shot on. But for me, Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram, the 2 pass catchers off the Jags offense that I would select in fantasy first. I think Romeo Dobbs, like just kind of being kind of completely forgotten about, in that Packers offense when he still had 8 total touchdowns last year, the same amount as Jaden Reed. So I do like him in this range as well, but I think the upside that Christian Watson brings just way too good to pass on there. So we're in a good spot here. We got some work to do at running back. We still got to find our quarterback, but Devon Achane, DeAndre Swift, Jonathan Brooks at running back. So we'll probably try to go 2 more running backs and a wide receiver to finish out the rest of this bench. And then we'll get obviously our quarterback as well. But wide receivers, just a tremendous amount of upside here. Jamar Chase, Deebo Samuel, DK Metcalf, Hollywood Brown, Christian Watson. Then we got Jake Ferguson. We got a solid tight end in here as well. So this draft looking very solid. But let's start to look ahead to the 10.8 and the 11.5. Okay. And maybe keep an eye on quarterback here. We see the last two quarterbacks gone, Prescott and Jordan Love. So, I think this breaking into this next tier, Purdy, Tua, Jared Goff. We want to keep an eye on it. And then I do like the idea of like drafting Jaden Daniels and then drafting any of those quarterbacks I just listed as a second quarterback, or a guy like Herbert, Lawrence, Kirk Cousins, Matthew Stafford, whoever you prefer. But I think with this next pick, especially seeing the way that the 10th round is starting here with three running backs gone, we have to go running back with this next selection, whether it's Trey Benson, Blake Corum, both in good handcuff situations, both have the caliber to, score fantasy points, even with James Conner or Kyron Williams healthy. Or we just go for a guy like Ezekiel Elliott or another handcuff like Zach Charbonnet. And see, this is where, like, when we go Jonathan Brooks at the 7.5, and maybe you prefer like a player like Brian Robinson Jr. or Zach Moss there, I think that's fine, because now going into the 10.8, we're in position to draft Chuba Hubbard, and we might even be in position to draft Chuba Hubbard at the 11.5. So, if Chuba's still there at the 11.5, we'll go ahead and handcuff Jonathan Brooks, just take over that backfield in this draft. If he's not, I think it's okay. And there goes Trey Benson. So, yeah, I mean, here, whoever you like best, Zeke, Corum, Zach Charbonnet, I think is fine. We'll just go ahead and go Zeke, because I think the volume that's guaranteed there is probably the most significant. And I don't know if it's going to turn out to be great, but at least it gives us a veteran option where, we do have kind of a lot of potential upside and swing and sway at running back so far. But I think that's okay looking at the rest of this roster. So Zeke's our RB4. I'm okay with coming out of a draft right now, redraft PPR, single quarterback with just four running backs. But I think in this position where we know Jonathan Brooks is going to miss time, it's important to try and draft at least a fifth running back who brings some sort of value here. So if you like Rico Dowdle, I do think you could have gone like Chuba Hubbard at the 10-8, for example, and locked up that Panthers backfield and then still got Rico Dowdle with this next selection. But I think either way, we're still in a good spot here. Looking at quarterbacks, we've seen Purdy gone. I'm not going to really panic at quarterback just yet. I think we're fine. If Blake Corum made it to 11.5, I would have been really happy. But I think the best move here is just to go ahead and draft Zach Charbonnet, get another handcuff for this roster, who is also a player who can have some immediate value as well. So once again, in a good spot here. And looking at this roster, all we need to do is draft one additional wide receiver. Sorry about that. And like I said, if we knew Jonathan Brooks wasn't going to miss time, and we go Zeke or Blake Corum or Benson, whoever you prefer with that pick at the 10.8, I think it's okay to get just one running back here and then two wide receivers to finish out in a double flex format. That's probably what I prefer, especially in full PPR. But, if you're practicing for a single flex format, there's really nothing I would do too differently here, but you can keep in mind, like, you don't maybe need to be so hard pressed on overall depth at wide receiver. But in double flex formats, full PPR, I want to be starting two wide receivers a majority of the time, a majority of the season. So right now, this roster puts us in position to do so and holds plenty of upside. We got a stud tight end that we can trust throughout the year. And our running backs are bringing PPR upside to the table for the most part as well. So I think we're in a great spot here. Take a quarterback and take the best available wide receiver, probably at the 13.5. Probably just go ahead and lock up quarterback at the 12.8. But if there's like a wide receiver at the 12.8 that I feel like I can't pass on, then we can make that decision. But the wide receivers that I like kind of in this range, Rashid Shaheed just went off the board, Josh Palmer at the 11.9, and now Jacoby Myers at the 12.1. Like, if any of those players fell out to the 12.8, I'm probably going to take them. I feel very good about those three guys for different reasons. I also like Josh Downs in full PPR. I think he's going to be a steal at his draft selection. I think Brandon Cooks is okay. I like Dontavion Wicks. I like Jahan Dotson. And then going a little bit deeper, I like guys like Demario Douglas, potentially Malachi Corley. And my deepest sleeper is going to be Demarcus Robinson. If all else fails, then I'm drafting Demarcus Robinson of the Rams with my final selection, basically in any format, because Demarcus Robinson Did plenty of good things the last couple of weeks of the season last year with the Rams. If anything happens to Puka long term or Cooper Cup long term, Demarcus Robinson's locked and loaded as a wide receiver 2 for the Rams. But even with both of those guys healthy, we're still going to see Demarcus Robinson be plenty involved with this offense this year. And he's been lighting up training camp. He's locked into that wide receiver 3 role with the Rams. So pass heavy offense, Sean McVay's system. I'm just all in on Demarcus Robinson, one of my favorite late round sleepers that I've talked about a lot since the beginning of the offseason. So, yeah, it looks like we're probably just going to go quarterback here. You can kind of pick whoever you prefer, Tua, Jared Goff. I think those are probably the two guys that we're going to target, and we're going to get one or the other with this selection at this point. If you wanted to like lock up Jaden Daniels here, and then so we'll go ahead and take we'll take Jared Goff. I was going to say, but if you want to lock up Jaden Daniels here, I like the idea of drafting Jaden Daniels for the upside and then getting like a pocket savvy quarterback who doesn't have that injury risk that Daniels maybe is going to have early in his career. You go back and look at the amount of hits and type of hits he would take in college. Makes you a little bit worried looking at what happened to Anthony Richardson last year, but man, the upside massive of Jaden Daniels. So if you want to pair him with the second quarterback, that's fine. But the way this roster is, although I'm pretty confident in the wide receiver room here, because we had to take that extra running back on this team, I think the best thing to do in this draft is to go ahead and go with another wide receiver. Now, you could argue if this is the final round that we're looking at, depending on who you're drafting with, and you're able to land Jaden Daniels at 13.5, maybe you just go ahead and take him because maybe a player like Demarcus Robinson, for example, will still be out there on the waiver wire heading into week 1. And especially with a player like Jonathan Brooks, who's going to potentially start the year on IR and be able to be someone you can slot off your active and starting roster, maybe you do just take Jaden Daniels here. So 1 or 2 picks to end this draft, Jaden Daniels or a wide receiver, Brandon Cooks, Dontavion Wicks, Jahan Dotson, maybe like Gabe Davis or Mike Williams. Some people do, maybe like Adam Thielen. I like Demario Pop Douglas okay here. Maybe like Rashad Bateman or Michael Wilson. Whoever it is, I think they're all okay there. And there goes Jaden Daniels. And, I think realistically, it's if you want Jaden Daniels because he is kind of one of those flashy like rookie quarterback names who, like, for example, is a much higher ADP on Underdog, you're probably going to have to be a little bit more aggressive in terms of drafting him, right? So I think it's more realistic that he actually went there. But yeah, I think if Daniels makes it to the 13.5, you have a player like Jonathan Brooks or TJ Hawkinson that you're going to throw on IR. I think you go ahead and you lock up the additional quarterback there. And then you go out on the waiver wire for a guy like Demarcus Robinson. But it depends on who you're drafting with. You guys know your leagues better than I do and what wide receivers might be potentially out there. So, all right, 13th and final round, we'll kind of wrap up here. And I think this was a great overall draft. So, looking at the team here, we end up with Goff at quarterback. Nothing crazy. I get it. But plenty of you guys out there love Jared Goff. And when you look at what he's done the last 2 years, been a top 10 quarterback in fantasy. QB 10 2022, QB 7 last year. Starts the season with a ton of indoor games as well, which Goff is kind of known for playing well in. So I love Goff there. I love the value we got on Jake Ferguson. Once again, you look at what Fergie did last year, top 10 tight end. Second most red zone targets for any tight end last year. So I love Ferguson. I think Dak will continue to rely on him this coming season. Running back, I mean, you could argue against this running back room, but at least we have just a tremendous amount of upside. A-Chain, Swift. If you don't like Swift there, remember, you can go Connor, you can go Stevenson, you can go Najee Harris. You don't like Jonathan Brooks here, you still go with a guy like Zach Moss or Brian Robinson over him. Zeke, I mean, once again, Chuba, Blake Corum, other options there. And then, if you wanted to go Dowdle with 11.5, we could have done that as well. So plenty of deviation at running back throughout this draft, but we absolutely smashed that wide receiver. And even if you want to argue against these wide receivers, there's other guys you could have taken. So Chase, Debo, Metcalf, Brown, Watson, Demarcus Robinson. So you look at this starting roster: Goff, A-Chain, Swift, Chase, Debo, Fergie, Metcalf, Hollywood. Beautiful roster, head to toe, tons of upside. Look absolutely great. A good bench here: Brooks, Watson, Zeke, Sharps, and Demarcus Robinson. We're probably going to be able to throw Jonathan Brooks on the IR and then go out and hunt the waiver wire for an additional player on this roster as well. So great mock draft, beautiful team. exactly what we came in and wanted to do, right? So, like I said at the beginning of the video, I'll link down below mock draft from the 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and 1.4. Then I'm working on getting a draft video out from every draft position for 12-team single quarterback leagues for you guys. I'll continue to get these uploaded as this week and next week continue to go on. And then I'll start working on some 10-team drafts in the same kind of format for you guys. And then maybe even 8 teams. But check out the channel, guys. We got tons of live streams where I'm drafting real fantasy football teams on Underdog, and where I've done tons of these mock drafts throughout the entire offseason with our community. So everything that you guys need, as well as tons of videos in terms of fantasy advice on the channel as well. If you guys are new, like I said, this is all we do here all year long. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button down below. Come join the community, whether you're in the best ball dynasty or just redraft. I'm here for you guys. I want to do everything I can to help you guys win your fantasy football championships this year and for several years to come. Let me know in the comments down below. What do you guys think of today's team overall? What do you guys think of the draft? Should I have done differently? Whatever. I don't know. If you guys have any fantasy football questions, drop them down below. I'll get back to you whenever I can. So with that, I'll say thank you guys so much for watching and or listening. And remember, you saw it here on The Catch.